we're going to talk about the top 9 barriers to effective communication. And I'm going to keep in mind professional situations because that's what this channel is all about. I'll talk about these 9 by putting them in groups of 3, and you tell me in the comment section which one gives you the most trouble personally. The first group of 3 is all about barriers around words. The first barrier is using complex or unfamiliar language. One of the ways we get hung up and misunderstand each other is by being too technical or using professional jargon. We each spend a lot of time developing our expertise, and that usually comes with a subset of terminology that we know well, but other people are not as familiar with. Now, you may be fluent in this overly technical vocabulary, but it would likely cause real communication barriers when you're speaking from someone who does not share your exact area of specialization. Now, I've given this tip in other videos, but do your best to speak in everyday language, plain English, as I like to say. That will help you bridge this barrier and connect with people in a more natural way during conversations. The second barrier is the way we organize our words. When we speak in a stream of consciousness or a rambling way, a disorganized way, other people will have difficulty following us. It might feel natural for you to think aloud like this, but it'll become a barrier for people to follow you and understand you. Instead, the tip is to present your ideas in an orderly way. Let's say you're having a conversation or you're in an important meeting. Communicate your ideas in main points. You may want to say first, second, and third when you get to each of those main points, for example. That's what clear communicators do. And then stick to your points and don't wander. The third way words can become a barrier is information overload. You've probably experienced this numerous times when you're in the role of the listener. When the other person seems to be talking at you for an extended period of time, that can get overwhelming. It's very hard to keep track of everything a long-winded person is saying because they just won't stop. It's too demanding, and you don't want to be this person. The tip to fix this is to take short talking turns. You make a point, give a quick example, and then stop talking. Give the other person time to absorb what you've said and then respond to what you've said. Short talking turns will help the conversation through that back and forth pattern. When you're talking with just a few sentences, there's lots of opportunity in the conversation to check for understanding as you go back and forth. If something isn't clear, you can quickly fix the misunderstanding. But if you're too long-winded and cause information overload, that misunderstanding is going to get dragged through the duration of the conversation. Be on the lookout for these 3 ways we create and experience communication barriers that all involve the way we use words. The next group of 3 all involve people's experiences and backgrounds. The first in this group is how we were raised. We were each brought up by adults who instilled in us certain values. They taught us life lessons and exposed us to all sorts of experiences. That social and family system comes with biases, attitudinal differences that we bring into a conversation. But we're not talking about right and wrong here. Instead, the differences in how we perceive things are shaped over time, and that creates a mental filter about everything we hear. We might have preferences, opinions, or resistances to all sorts of topics that the other person may see differently. And when those don't align, that can cause friction and a communication barrier between people that we'll then have to overcome. Another barrier related to backgrounds is our simple demographics. We're all a certain age. We all come from a certain culture. We have a certain sex, a status background. Each of these individual differences makes a difference in how we see the world, and we can let that come between us. But let's just talk about age for a moment. There's a lot of research and writing about generational differences between people at work, and some of it's overdone, and baby boomers are mostly headed toward retirement. We still have Generation X, Millennials, and Gen Z, all part of the workforce. Even in the same family, we each grew up listening to certain types of music, watching our favorite TV shows, certain kinds of movies. They're all tied to the age demographic. And this can become a real practical barrier when you're trying to understand each other. Now add in all the other demographic factors I mentioned, and collectively this can form a huge barrier between the way we understand each other. The third area under our background barriers is all about our psychological triggers and filters. We each have what we might call a common sense that we've developed, both good and bad, about the way we see the world. Unfortunately, sometimes bad things happen to us. We all go through difficult experiences. And sometimes we end up with what you might call issues that shape the way we hear things. Then if somebody brings something up that rubs us the wrong way or comes across the wrong way, even if they have only good intentions, those triggers and filters can become a barrier. We might feel offended, hurt, insulted. The problem is most of us don't realize that we see the world through those psychological barriers. We might fool ourselves into thinking that we have a pure, objective view of the world and the other person is biased. And that's a big part of the problem. The tip for all three of these barriers connected to our background is first, you have to know yourself. Have enough self-awareness to recognize when these filters are at work and are likely influencing the way you see things. Then step back and do your best to see things from the other person's view. Put yourself in their shoes. Now, you don't have to agree with everybody and everything you hear. Just recognize that you may have a different but equally legitimate background, and that is shaping the way you both see things. The third group is all about what I'll call physical barriers. An obvious barrier is the physical distance that we often have in our professional settings. These days, we do a lot of work over email and Zoom, and that physical separation can become a barrier because we're losing lots of nonverbal cues that we'd otherwise get if we were speaking face to face. When we're online in one way or another, we can't as accurately hear tone, attitude, warmth, humor, vulnerability, all of those other communication information and cues that would create a stronger interaction, a stronger relationship. That physical distance creates that barrier, and it's a limitation that you can feel in the moment. The tip for this is that when our nonverbal cues are less available, we have to rely on being more direct verbally. If you're happy about something, you have to say it directly. If you need something from the other person, you have to verbalize that need clearly. They're not going to pick up on more subtle cues that they might pick up on if you were face to face. The next physical barrier is what we'll call noise. And there are lots of different types of noise. That might be the noisy environment that you're in that causes stress and communication problems. Sometimes there's noise in the communication system that you're using. I was on the phone with someone from another college this morning, and some of her words dropped out and other words were garbled. I was missing a piece of the information, but she didn't know that at first, and that created a temporary misunderstanding in the conversation, and then I had to ask for clarification. The tip is to reduce and eliminate any kind of noise that you can either filter out of the room or the system, and you may have to ask the other person to repeat themselves like I did in this situation. In most cases, fixing issues around noise is not complicated. You just have to take the time and have the patience to do it and trust that hearing the message accurately will reduce misunderstandings. The last physical barrier is that our physical ears don't always work so well. I'm calling this a physical barrier for obvious reasons, but it's a little different than the other ones. I read information from the World Health Organization the other day that up to 20% of the entire global population has some level of hearing loss. So that means if you're in a room with 4 other people, it's likely that one of you has some kind of hearing impairment. It's very common, in other words. Numerous people in my life have hearing impairments enough so that it has become a communication issue in daily conversations, including me, by the way. One of the worst things we can do in situations like this is to lose patience with the other person and blame them. They're not ignoring you. They just can't hear you as well as they'd like to. For example, I've noticed that many of these issues are exaggerated when a person is trying to talk from room to room. So we have a rule in our house, don't talk room to room if you have something important to say. Also, if there's water running, I've noticed it's very difficult for the other person if they have a hearing impairment. If somebody's washing their hands, doing the dishes, taking a shower, don't expect them to be a good listener while the water is running. If there's any other source of sound, like a TV or a phone, that's going to exaggerate the problem for people with a hearing impairment. So here are some quick tips when a hearing impairment is in the mix. Have patience and take small actions that make a big difference. For example, stand closer, look right at them with direct eye contact, speak clearly the first time. Make sure you can both hear them and see them in terms of what they're saying. You may have to write some things out or point at a screen once in a while to show them what you're talking about. These are the 9 barriers, the 3 groups of 3 that I came up with based upon the research and thinking I've done and reflection I've done over the course of my professional career. As you look at this list, which of these do you feel like gives you the most trouble? I would love to hear your comments in that section below. Till next time, thanks, God bless, and I will see you soon.